Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Breakthrough to Best Self with Holly and Lauren-Aaliyah. And oh my goodness, are we excited to be here? I'm located in Atlanta, Georgia. And Lauren,
Yeah,
where are you?
and I'm on the other side of the world in Durban, South Africa. Pleasure to be here. So glad you guys could join us again on Breakthrough to Best Self. Holly, we got an awesome show lined up today. Tell the folks what's going on.
Oh my goodness. Well, we are holistic health and wellness vloggers, and holistic wellness is close to both of our hearts. So we're going to kick it off. We're going to kick off the entire podcast life with the two of us. And we're glad that you're here with us. Just starting the conversation out with about holistic wellness. What is it to us? And, we will get more in depth as the recordings come along, but we're going to do sort of an umbrella overall view of what do we see? What does holistic wellness mean to both of us?
Mhm.
And we definitely will, we encourage comments, and we will respond to comments, and we will also probably base some future shows on some of the comments we receive. So we welcome those. So I'm going to start out with you, Lauren. Hey, easy question. What does holistic wellness mean to you?
Yeah, holistic wellness. That's interesting. That it's been used a lot. We're seeing a lot of bloggers and even podcasters that are referring to holistic wellness. We're seeing a lot of coaches and new practitioners, wellness practitioners, embracing this holistic wellness. Certainly, as you said, Holly, it is important to the work that you and I do. For me, let me say, can we start by saying what it's not?
Yes.
And I say that because I think about what I used to think about wellness before, like health and wellness. In the past, it was very limited to physical health for me. Like, oh, wellness, oh, that's got to be about, look, of course, health in the sort of traditional sense, but for a long time, health and wellness was very tied up into what I looked like, forget what I felt like. So physically, what I looked like. Later
Yes.
on, I think as I got older, it started to be about what I feel like. But
Mm-hmm.
I think about myself as a teenage girl or in my 20s, um, where issues of ill health were probably further from my mind.
Yes.
Wellness or holistic wellness back then would, if somebody had said holistic wellness, I would have probably thought about, my ability to compete in sport and what my body looked like. So that is an aspect of holistic wellness. It's the physical aspect. As I aged, I started to realize that, of course, it was more than just what I looked like on the outside, but what I felt like on the inside. But it was still pretty limited to physical well-being. Um, it was later on my own sort of self-development and wellness journey that I started to embrace other aspects of wellness. I was confronted really early on in my own family with understanding mental health and mental health challenges. Um, on my maternal family line, we've had several challenges with mental health and uh, several of my mom's siblings were diagnosed with mental health issues. So my understanding of health and wellness progressed to embracing mental health. And I think that by the time I was in my mid-30s, I think I probably understood that I would have said holistic wealth is your physical and mental health.
Right. Right.
And then later still, um, I think, I'm 53 years old, and probably towards my mid 40s, I really started to understand emotional health, um, and spiritual health. In fact, the two, I think emotional and spiritual for me happened at a very similar time in my mid-40s. And so where I am now is, just understanding the balance between my physical, mental health, my emotional wellness, as well as my spiritual well-being. So all aspects, Holly, and I know that that's certainly an approach that we want to take on Breakthrough to Best Self, is to capture all these aspects. What is your view, Halls, on holistic wellness, and some of the aspects that I've touched on? Your views on those?
Yeah. Well, for me, wellness, from at younger ages, let alone the word holistic, there was no concept of what that was when I was
Right.
younger. 100% was, for me, it was going to the standard doctor. They would diagnose whatever situation was happening for me. They would prescribe something, either it would be a pill of some sort, or it would be another specialist of some sort. And never realizing that there was a lot of underlying things that were happening as well to contribute to what was going on, how I was being diagnosed. So it was all physical, all physical. I didn't consider emotional, mental, or spiritual. I dabbled in spiritual. But I didn't take it on as this was how I could be healthy and well as a human being on this planet. Never really took that into consideration. So when you say something that really struck my heart is when you said part of that experience was my physical body. Looking for me, it was I would see my physical body, and you and I, we are FARA certified. I just want to say this to our audience. FARA means Food Addiction Recovery Advocate. And as in our intro video, you may have heard Lauren and I speak on the fact that we are both recovering from food addiction, in addition to everything else we're doing. So at that time, I was deep in the food, and I was overweight, obese. And so my measure of any sort of wellness was, what does my body look like? My body never met the standard of what America and all over the world, as you and I have spoken, what that standard is. And so I never thought I had wellness, even though I was playing sports and I was still doing all these things as a very large-bodied individual. I did not think I was well. And so it was, I didn't want to go to the doctor. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do that because I'm not well. So why should I even go to the doctor and hear that? And then, as you and I know, in the research that Dr. Joan Iflin has done and our own personal research into this, there's a lot less information out there about that experience. So going to a healthcare professional, they were reinforcing, oh, you're wrong, you're not doing it right, you're not well, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Let alone the fact that there's a mental, emotional, and spiritual aspect to it. So moving forward, the mental was the next in line. That was the next realization I had. I was struggling with major anxiety. I had had anxiety in my life since I was a child. And I just thought it was what our family's DNA. And it could very well be that, but what I do know is that processed foods, some people call them ultra processed foods, but those types of foods aggravate that part of my brain that gets anxious. So I started going to mental health professionals to help with the anxiety because it was very uncomfortable living with anxiety on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing was that when I let go of some of these foods, it really came down, which gave me space to look at the next pieces, which were the emotional and the spiritual.
Right.
And
I want to circle
addressing
back.
all four,
Yeah.
whoa.
Too much. I'm going to circle back to food because I wanted us to talk about that a little bit more a little later on. I want to come back to what you were saying about anxiety. And it's interesting. I shared earlier that there were so many family members of mine afflicted with mental health illness. It feels so long ago that, I'd almost forgotten that there was a period of time that, I really struggled with anxiety. I was medicated for chronic anxiety, repeated panic attacks, and was, for a while there was on medication. I saw a therapist, and it was extremely helpful to me. I'm extremely grateful for the role that certainly mental health practitioners play,
Yeah,
as well as, on a case-by-case basis, a role for pharmaceuticals. So just,
absolutely.
a disclaimer out here that, at no point in time, as much as Holly and I will share about our own journey and our path and our experience with alternate modalities, at no point are we saying that there is no role for traditional medicine or traditional healthcare. So I just want to put that out there. As I say, I agree with you, Holly, that so much of what I didn't know then that I know now is that so much of my anxiety and panic attacks were being fueled by a diet that was, just wall-to-wall processed food. We now know, thanks to the wonderful work of many of the researchers, and in particular, Dr. Joan Ifland, who, spent 3 years scouring, 6 to 8,000 existing studies to pull together a textbook that she co-authored and edited on processed food addiction, the foundations, how to assess for it and how to recover from it. We now know how directly these foods affect mental health. And so that link between food and mental health, the research is just, it's unequivocal. There's no denying the link between mental health and eating processed food. I guess what I'm only in more recent years starting to fully understand is just how integrated all of these aspects of health are, and the role that food can play in all of them. So I think the link between physical health as well as food and physical health, well established, the longest established kind of connection between food and health, physical health and food. Food and mental health, I think there's, again, growing understanding. Certainly, there's no denying when it comes to the research. But from a personal experience, just I didn't fully understand emotional well-being and emotional balance and my diet, like the food I was eating, and the fact that, because we talk about mental health, and sometimes mental health and emotional health can sound like the same things, and I guess there's some overlap. Mental health, we're talking quite specifically around diagnoses, around mental health conditions. Emotional health, we're talking day-to-day mental health, day-to-day mental stability, day-to-day emotional well-being. And I didn't know until I quit sugar and flour in particular.
Yes.
What direct impact that would have on my emotional state, my ability to stay calm, my ability to manage big emotions like sadness or frustration or even anger in a different way, like process that in a healthy way. And until I really got into recovery, and you spoke about the fact that we are FARA certified, and a lot of our training is with Dr. Joan Ifland and in her daily support community. And it wasn't until I was in that support community that I fully understood the connection between my emotional wellness and food. Talk to me a little bit about your own experience, Holly, with food and emotional well-being and even mental health. You mentioned anxiety, but let's go to emotional
Yes.
well-being. How does that link up with food for you?
Well, it's interesting. I have been, and maybe some here can relate. I've been one of those people who has always pushed down the painful emotions. I didn't want to feel them. I never had any, and I love my family. If you're listening, I just didn't have any examples of how to process emotions. And so stuffing down emotions, it takes some effort. And for me, my go-to was the food. And I learned this at a very young age, um, middle school years, okay? Where, we all know middle school is not the funnest place to be. I don't know. Lauren, you may have had a blast in middle school. Me, not so much, okay? But so I learned young that I could come home from a painful day in middle school, get some processed junk, turn on the television, and numb out. And I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
have to feel that upset. I learned that at a young age, and I just kept doing it. I kept doing it. This is what works for me, is what I thought. But what I didn't realize is that those emotions don't go away. They're just stuffed down inside. And you know that I've been doing work on allowing myself to feel those emotions and to just take a moment to just breathe and let them and experience them. That's one thing. The other thing is, well, okay, then what do I do with them? If I'm not going to stuff them down, I'm going to experience them. Are there some thoughts behind the emotions? Now, sometimes it's just straight up, I'm having a painful experience and I'm going to sit with it. Sometimes it's, I'm having a painful thought and I am going to inquire into it and see if that thought is actually true.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different tools that you and I use to process emotions. Those are just two. But what I have found is my overall health and wellness is better because I do process my emotions now instead of trying to stuff them down.
Right. So the whole aspect of processing emotions rather than eating over it, that's the one link that we find, very directly with food and emotions, is that we can eat over it. And, for a long time, I called myself an emotional eater, or I would say I'm emotionally eating. You and I now teach a course, and one of our modules is on emotional eating. And I guess the misnomer that is emotional eating, we now know that actually it is pathways in the brain that are being triggered, addicted cells in the brain that are being triggered by big emotions. So beneath the emotions is actually something else going on. But we'll talk about that in another episode. I think just, for the point of this conversation, to say that the link between emotions and food can be, as some of us experience, where we go to the food to suppress, as you said, shove down those emotions instead of processing them. And then something really sinister happens, is that when we eat processed food to numb emotions, emotions are amplified. So it's such a awful
Yes.
cycle, because again, research being very clear on how sugar in particular and other combinations of processed food can actually lead to negative emotions or big emotions like sadness and loneliness, because what we get when we eat these highly processed foods is we get this massive spike of dopamine in the limbic system of the brain, and then you get this really equal to the spike is the dip. And quite often it's on that downturn of dopamine in the brain that we can experience this really down in the dumps kind of feeling that we may call depressed or sad or
Sure.
just low. so, that's the two sort of links directly with food and emotions. So food is a big part of holistic wellness, right? The pursuit of holistic wellness. We can't talk about holistic wellness without
Right.
talking about the food. You cannot be in the pursuit of holistic wellness. And so it's always interesting and a little disappointing to me when I hear, when I hear people talk about holistic wellness and they're addressing mental health and physical health in a very narrow way, and there's just no mention, except for weight loss in relation to food. They are not talking about the impact of processed food on holistic wellness because it affects your physicality, it affects you emotionally, it affects you mentally. And I guess the last piece of this conversation today is let's talk a little bit about spiritual wellness and how does it all come together for you? Where does physical wellness fit into the holistic wellness picture for you?
Yeah. Okay, so that was the final piece for me, to bring it all together, the spiritual side. And what I found interesting, Lauren, I know your experience and my experience are different because you were pursuing that before you found the recovery from the food and that sort of thing. And I had to go through the recovery and the emotional and the mental, and then the spiritual really started to appear in my life. I'm getting chills. This happens sometimes. You'll get used to it. And I think what happened for me is I was able to have the space in my brain, the bandwidth in my brain. So we talk about sometimes, I'm going to go back to the food. It's not only about the food, but have you ever experienced brain fog? I have. When I was in the processed food, I had brain fog. And you were talking about mental health and the shame about, the shame that comes along with, I'm not doing it right. I'm not dieting right. My body's not the right size. I'm not doing enough. Just all that stuff that comes along with it left no space for me to connect in a spiritual way. So, and I think that everybody's path is different. When we work with clients, you and I work with clients on the outside. Um, what is it what is your path? And sometimes people don't know yet, and that's okay too. It's
Yeah,
okay, the process. But Lauren, what does it mean for you?
yeah. Well, I do know, like as you said, my spiritual path started before I call it my sort of physical wellness, getting my food clean, learning to process big emotions. My spiritual path is something that started before. What I will say is that working on the other aspects of my health, so my physical health, processing my emotions, taking care of my mental well-being, has only amplified my spiritual growth. I feel
Yeah.
more spiritually connected than I've ever felt. I look back at, photographs. Now we talk about how physically, uh, you were saying that depending on your body shape and size at some point, you were like, okay, that clearly is, I thought I'm not well. So what was the point of even having conversations about health back then? I look back at photographs of myself when I was not well. And it goes beyond what I physically look like, because that's certainly part of it. I have photographs of myself where I'm not well. Now, take note, I had no major diagnoses. I had never, thank goodness, I had never had any major diagnosis of chronic illness or disease. That wasn't, particularly managed, but none of the big sort of main diagnoses. Yet I look at those pictures now and I see somebody who was not well. Not only because I was extremely overweight, obese, and struggling, physically not looking well. My skin looks pasty. I've got severe acne on my face when I was, extremely overweight. So physically, I didn't look like the picture of good health. Of course, at some point in that time, I developed an autoimmune skin condition that, you can't really see in that picture. But certainly that when I look at that picture and I think of that period of time, I would have probably been seriously inflamed. But I look at my eyes, and I'm going to talk about, my spiritual health. I look at that picture and I see the sadness. I see the emotional distress in my eyes.
Yeah.
But I also see a lack of spiritual connection that I now recognize in myself now. There's a light from my eyes. There's a light from me. There's an aura, if you will, that is just lacking even in the pictures.
Yeah.
And so I look at those pictures now with my present understanding of holistic wellness, and I can honestly look back at myself, particularly mid to late 30s, into my early 40s even, and say, oh, you were not well. I have such deep compassion for myself that didn't know the answers, or that there was even another way of being. But yeah, a really long-winded roundabout way of saying, with taking care of my physical health, with processing my emotions, with it being really careful with my mental health, and which includes, noticing what I'm thinking and what I'm feeding to my brain, as a neurolinguistics practitioner myself, I totally understand the value of the language that I'm using in my brain, and that's part of my mental health regime, is to take care of what I'm thinking and what I'm letting into my brain. But taking care of all of that, Holly, has only elevated my spiritual growth. Let's say my spiritual openness to understanding the spiritual aspects of myself. And so for me, it's all just so linked. I can't separate them. I can't take care of one piece and not the other. So as I make time for my physical care and my mental health and my processing and my, food addiction recovery work, and, my sort of being fulfilled, we haven't spoken about just being fulfilled, fulfilling your passion, working towards a life that feels fulfilling. And that's an important aspect of holistic wellness as well, and can sometimes feed into that aspect of spirituality. I make time for my spiritual health as well. So yeah. Thanks, Holly. Any thoughts just as we wrap up this particular episode today? And it's been a bit of a longer one than we normally do. But as you can imagine, we're trying to encompass, I think, everything that we hope to bring you in this channel in one umbrella. And of course, everything we've spoken about today, Holly and I intend to really pick apart as individual topics. And so we'd love to hear from you. If you are watching this video later, please drop us a comment. And if you'd like to follow us and get an update on when we upload new videos, do subscribe to the channel. Do hit that notifications bell so that you are notified when we upload new videos. We absolutely love having you here and would love to have you as part of the conversation. So let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on holistic wellness. Holly, some closing comments from you as we wrap up.
Absolutely. Living a holistic life, I think, is something we can all get on board with, because it does impact all aspects of our lives. It's an ongoing process. Lauren and I aren't saying that we've got it all figured out, and but what we are saying is we continue to walk in that direction, and we invite you to walk in that direction with us. And as Lauren said, any sort of comments you want to drop in there, we pay attention. It's a wonderful life when we are mindful about what we're doing, and we bring in all these aspects. So we invite you just to take a journey with us. And we're all in the process of breaking through to our best selves in any given moment and any given day. So let's do this. Let's do this. Yeah. That's my words of wisdom, Lauren. That's what I got for you.
Thanks, Holly. Thanks, everybody, for watching this video. And we will catch you on the next episode of Breakthrough to Best Self. See you there.
Hi, everybody.